So in order to understand the answer to this problem, let's figure out what exactly we mean by diminishing marginal productivity. So here I have two empty plots. On one, I have total productivity, and on the bottom, I have marginal productivity. So this should illustrate the relationship between the two. So in total productivity, we have a point at which, as we increase the number of inputs, we get an increase in the number of productivity, in the amount of productivity. When you go from having one worker to two workers, it helps to have that second worker, because that second worker can now help that first worker out some more. The first worker doesn't have to handle everything themselves. Now, when you go from 2 to 3, let's say, it can start to get a little bit crowded. So you have diminishing marginal returns. So over here, this is increasing productivity, and this is increasing productivity, but at a slower rate. But at some point, you will have so many people that it actually starts to decrease productivity altogether. You won't be able to produce as much. When you go from 1 to 2, it helps. When you go from 2 to 3, it helps, but at a slower rate. When you go to 3 to 4, though, it could get so crowded that your people won't be able to help at all. So that it gets too crowded and people won't be able to work efficiently whatsoever. Now we can plot this as such. So if we just extend these lines, marginal productivity is increasing until we hit this green line, and then it starts to decrease until we hit the blue line. And when we hit the blue line, we actually get to 0. Okay, so we have diminishing marginal productivity after we get to 0, so that the total productivity is actually being hurt by hiring more inputs. So when we're talking about this problem here, in order to figure out this problem here, when we're trying to figure out when do we have diminishing marginal productivity, we have to see when marginal productivity is less than 0. When does it go from being greater than to less than 0? So here it goes from 4 to 6. That's a positive change. 6 to 2. So from here we have increasing marginal returns. Now we have from 6 to 2 diminishing marginal returns, right? Because we are slowing down marginal production. We're still increasing the quantity of goods produced, but at a slower rate than we were before. When we go from 1 to 0, we still have diminishing marginal returns. But when we get to 0, because of diminishing marginal returns, we are going to decrease the amount of productivity we have, to the extent that if we hire another lumberjack, we will actually reduce productivity so that we produce less than we did when we had 5 lumberjacks or 4 lumberjacks. So this at 5 lumberjacks, we diminishing marginal productivity kicks in. And to answer part B, we can just look at this, or when we're talking about the bottom half of the table, we can just look at the relationship between these plots here. This is why we have diminishing marginal returns and then eventually diminishing marginal product. Because going from 1 to 2 lumberjacks, it helps. The second lumberjack can help the first lumberjack. When we go from 2 to 3, there might they're not as efficient. It gets a little crowded for them all to work and chop down trees. But when we go from 3 to 4, it still gets a little bit harder, but it gets even more crowded in the forest wherever they're cutting. When they get to 4 to 5, it becomes even more crowded. And when they go from 5 to 6, it becomes so crowded that they can't function at all. Or not that they can't function at all, they just